Thank you all for coming today. We're very excited to once again host the Annenberg Leadership and Management Speaker Series on Harvey Mudd's campus. So for those of you who may not be familiar with me, and I have had a bunch of people come up to me and say, "Oh, you're Maria." I'm Maria Clave, past president of Harvey Mudd College and current president of Math for America, which is an organization in New York City that works with 1,000 fantastic math and science teachers. But I'm especially honored to be back in Claremont to celebrate the inauguration of President Harriet B. Nembhard. And these are not in the remarks, but I could not be happier to see my successor be Harriet. To kick off our inauguration activities, we're here today to hear from distinguished alumnus Honam, class of 1988. And I'll let President Nembhard give you more details about Honam in a few moments. But first, I would like to share some of the history of the Annenberg Speaker Series. The Annenberg Leadership and Management Speaker Series is an integral part of Harvey Mudd College's commitment to encouraging students to lead with integrity. Endowed in 2005 through a generous gift in honor of Trustee Howard DeShong III, who is class of '89. Wave, Howard. And this also isn't in the notes, but I just want to mention that Howard's son, also named Howard, graduated, I believe, in the class of 22, and he is one of the 13, count them 13, alumni who have graduated from Harvey Mudd with a 4.0 average. Not this Howard, the other Howard. And the other Howard is currently Schmidt Futures Fellow at Caltech. And I'm hoping is going to move to New York City after he finishes that, so I'll get to see him more often. The Walter and Leonore Annenberg Fund for Leadership Development showcases accomplished individuals who are recognized leaders in their fields. These public lectures engage the Harvey Mudd College community in important thought and discussion about the role of leadership in the world. So now says Howard is here with us today, so I'd like to take a moment to recognize him and the DeShong family for their continued support and commitment to Harvey Mudd. I want to say Howard was on the search committee that hired me. He has been on the board, has chaired our audit committee. He and his family have had a tremendous impact on this institution. So let's give another round of applause. Through the Annenberg Leadership Series, Harvey Mudd and the Annenberg Foundation are helping to shape our students' understanding and practice of leadership. Past speakers have represented a wide range of leadership styles and a broad array of organizations, including Intel, Qualcomm, Microsoft, the Aerospace Corporation, Bloomberg, Yelp, Facebook, and Google. And now let me introduce President Harriet Nembhard, the 6th president of Harvey Mudd College. She's a leader in the field of industrial and operations engineering and a voice on the national level for transforming undergraduate STEM education. President Nembhard came to Harvey Mudd from the University of Iowa, where she was Dean of the College of Engineering. She's also held academic leadership positions at Oregon State University and the Pennsylvania State University. She began her college career at age 16. That's why she looks so incredibly young now. Studying management engineering at Claremont McKenna College and industrial engineering at Arizona State University before attaining her PhD in industrial and operations engineering at the University of Michigan. Her research into co-curricular STEM education and its role in undergraduate identity formation received National Science Foundation funding, and she serves on the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, Medicine Joint Roundtable on Advancing Change in Undergraduate STEM Education. President Nembhard says she was drawn to Harvey Mudd College by its mission and its people. She notes that this is a community that is invested in innovation with a very student-oriented mission. Please welcome President Harriet Nembhard.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, I'm speaking into a microphone.
Good. Well, thank you, Maria, for that very warm welcome. I must say that your 17-year presidency at Harvey Mudd was truly groundbreaking, and I'm honored to follow in the footsteps of such a dynamic leader, and the college is certainly fortunate to have had your leadership. So thank you for being here today and opening our series. Thank you. Well, let me add my welcome to all of you as well. At Harvey Mudd, we have some very treasured traditions. One of them is this Annenberg series. Another is a very special award. Every spring since 1982, the Department of Humanities, Social Sciences, and the Arts, currently chaired by Professor Darrell Wright, awards a graduating senior with the William and Margaret Radley Prize in Humanities, Social Sciences, and the Arts. The prize celebrates students whose outstanding contributions in the HSA program embody the college's goal to nurture a profound understanding of themselves and of the human condition. It's not just about top grades, it's about being ambassadors for the HSA program on campus, showcasing the broad concerns and interests that the program seeks to foster. I was really moved when I heard one of the past award recipients, today's Annenberg guest speaker and engineering alum, Ho Nam, talk about how his appreciation for the prize and what it stands for has only grown over the years. But before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Nam and his background. Ho Nam is managing director of Altos Ventures, focusing on investments in the areas of software, mobile, and internet technologies. Two of the very well-known companies that Altos Ventures has supported has been Roblox and Coupang. He's led many of the firm's prior investments, including Evolve, which was acquired by Oracle, and Say Now, which was acquired by Google. He is also a husband, father, mentor, and global citizen. He began his professional career at Bain Company in San Francisco. Ho received an MBA from Stanford University and a BS in engineering here from Harvey Mudd College. He's described how the study of humanities continues to give him insight and perspectives in his current career as an investor, how for him the value of his liberal arts education keeps appreciating. His humility and courage to challenge himself and his team to keep getting better is truly inspiring. In today's conversation, we dive deep into what it means to be successful and what it means to do so with kindness and curiosity. I'm so excited for this conversation and eager for you to participate and engage with it. Please help me welcome Mr. Ho Nam to the stage. Thank you so much. So as I have said, the Annenberg series has been a very important part of our campus for many years. With your background in startups, it just seems so fitting that you'd be here to help us restart this series after a 4-year hiatus. So we really thank you for being here. Could you start by telling us a little bit about Altos Ventures and what the ethos of venture differently means?
Sure. So first of all, I can't believe I'm here on stage. Like, why am I here? And I'm so truly honored to be asked to re-kickstart the Annenberg Lecture Series in such an important day, important week for you. So thank you. So Venture Differently came about. I started Altos Ventures with two classmates from Stanford Business School. And it was really quite an accident in some ways. It was a Stanford professor that had been advising an investor, and he no longer had the bandwidth to continue to advise, and said, why don't you just hire some young people to help manage this pool of capital? And so we did not have to fundraise for our first fund in 1996. We were just kind of asked. And they had to convince us in some ways to kind of leave our jobs to consider doing it. And our recommendation to the investor was, don't do it. But we said, let's just stay in touch, because when the markets crash, that would be a good time to start. And they convinced us to maybe get started anyway, in a small way, kind of learn by doing, and if the markets ever crashed, they would have a lot of capital to put to work, and then we would have a running start. So that was kind of the theory. Now, what ended up happening was we did eventually run into the crash in the dot-com era, and we were incredibly humbled. And we thought we were so good, we were doing so well. When the markets are going up, you think you're so smart. And it was really during that period that we understood what Venture Differently was all about. We had to do a lot of soul searching. We felt like what we were doing, what we believed were the right things to do, it made us fundamentally question all of our assumptions. And coincidentally, it was around that time that I went to the first annual meeting at Berkshire Hathaway in Omaha. And so it was May of '99, peak of the bubble. And of course, everybody's asking Warren Buffett, hey, how come you're not investing in telecom and these dot-coms? You're missing it. You're kind of like missing what's going on. And he very calmly explained what he was doing and why he was going to stick to his knitting. And I thought that was really fascinating. It was at the height of our arrogance, but yet I sensed something was different. And he was sitting here in Omaha, and he always talked for decades that he was better off in Omaha. He was glad he was not in New York City with all the other investors, because all that noise, all that chatter, all that groupthink would have crowded his mind. And so he is the exemplar for think different, do things your own way, separate yourself from the crowd. And that really got us on the journey of how do we reinvent the venture capital model? How do we do things differently? And going through that dot-com crash, and things kept getting worse. 2000 is when the crash started. 2001, I felt like I was being kicked while I was down because September 11 happened. Things kept getting worse, and it really bottomed out in 2003. And we didn't raise our first fund after the dot-com crash until 2005. So there was a 6-year gap. These days, we raise a fund every couple of years. There was a 6-year gap between our 99 fund and 2005, and we were able to kind of somehow survive that deep, low, dark period. And East Coast University Endowment backed us. They were the anchor LPs, and when they backed us, they said, they were already a very established limited partner in some really famous venture funds. They were LP in Greylock since the 1970s, LP in Sequoia since the 1980s. They had made a lot of money with very established venture firms. And if we said we were going to be just better than these guys, we're going to work harder, we're scrappy, I don't think they would have backed us. But they backed us because we had a different thesis about how to make money in the venture capital, and it was an alternate thesis to the mainstream. And so they continued to invest in the mainstream venture capital, but they said, we have room in our portfolio for something like this, something different. And to me, it was a clear lesson in life that you could strive to be better or strive to be the best, but also you could strive to be different. The differentiation, something that's uniquely authentic to who you are and a unique voice in the world, that has a chance to be heard. And fast forward since 2005 to now, Altos has come up and become sort of the second most important relationship they have across all of the managers, across all asset classes, passing some of those other established firms that they've been involved with since the 1970s. But we did it in less than half the time with less than half the capital that they had committed over the years. So that was kind of a long-winded answer to differently, but we had to be different to just survive, basically. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I can really appreciate that. Often one of the things I'm trying to connect with people when I see this very, very unique approach to life is, where does that come from in an early formation? And the way that I sometimes get at that is to ask, what were you like as an 8-year-old? Were you already venturing differently then? Did you have chores? Did you have siblings? What was it in that formation, either your neighborhood or the things that you were interested in, that you might tie to the way you came to approach business?
Yeah. So it's interesting you picked that time period, age 8. It was at age 9 that I actually came to the U.S. with my family. So we immigrated. And so things almost started all over for me at age 9. I didn't know any English, so we had to kind of learn very quickly. And I didn't really, it's amazing that you knew you wanted to be an engineer at age 8. I had no idea what I wanted to be. I was just trying to survive, right? Just trying to learn the language, trying to fit in. And my parents, being new immigrants with very little, they came to this country with $5,000. And that's kind of what they had to kind of start their life all over again. And we actually brought over a whole bunch of furniture too. For some reason, they thought the furniture from Korea was higher quality than furniture in the US. They brought over furniture, and we literally had some of the same furniture for like 30 years after we moved to the US. So that's kind of all we had. And so we were forced in some ways to, we were different. We weren't trying to be different, we just were. And I think that probably helped me forge kind of a different, unique path. Certainly my parents were very different, to kind of abandon their life in Korea. They had a much more comfortable life. My father was very established there. We had helpers and so on. And my mother was not working. And in the US, she had no helpers, and she had to do all the work, supporting not only professionally, was starting a business together with my father, but also at home. And so I guess in some ways all the kids had to chip in. I was the oldest, so I was 9. My brothers were 7 and 5, and so I was the babysitter, I was the dishwasher, I was the coordinator of all kinds of activities. My brothers were still a little bit too young to pick up some of the chores, so that's kind of what we had to do.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. I did know that I was an industrial engineer at an early age. Perhaps I did not know it was the discipline of industrial engineering, but my curiosities lend to that direction. When you came to Harvey Mudd, did you know that engineering would be your major? Did you see yourself as an engineer at an early age?
Yeah, that's a good question. For some reason, I did gravitate toward engineering because at some point in high school, I read that the number one major of all the Fortune 500 CEOs at the time was engineering. And I had an interest in business. I actually went to this summer program at Darden in the business school at UVA. So I was interested in business, but then I read engineering. And why is it engineering? And I thought, well, because it teaches you fundamental problem-solving skills, analytical skills, and I thought it would really teach really interesting skill set to kind of enter the business world. And I decided not to apply to MIT or Caltech. And I had some exposure to MIT because I went to school in the Boston area. And I actually didn't know anything about Harvey Mudd. But when I found out about Harvey Mudd, and they sent me this junk mail. It literally said junk mail in 2-inch letters. And they said, and they literally, it was so interesting. And they said, oh, you must get a lot of this junk mail from all these different colleges, which is true. But let us tell you about Harvey Mudd. And you look at the statistics and the kinds of grad schools that people were accepted to, the average SAT scores, the kind of careers people went to. I was very intrigued. But the thing that really made Harvey Mudd stand out, and this links back to the Radley Prize, is you had to take 1/3 of all your classes in the humanities, and you had to minor in the humanities. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting. And then I ended up taking so many classes outside of the core STEM work. I majored in engineering, but I took so many different classes that I made up my own minor at the time. It was PPE, Politics, Philosophy, and Economics. And so, because I took so many different classes, and Harvey Mudd was kind enough to allow me to make up my own minor. And so I just decided to go very broad. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And I want to double click on that experience with the Radley Prize at that time. Could you tell us what else do you remember about receiving the prize in 1988? And how did you see it then, and how do you see it now? Yeah,
well, I remember it because I didn't know anything about it. And so I didn't know such a thing existed until graduation day. And you look at the program, and there's a little star, and somebody won a Radley Prize, and like I was the recipient. It's like, okay. So I didn't know anything about it. But then reading about it, it was very gratifying in some ways because, wow, like this is the reason I picked this college. This is why I was fascinated. And I was inspired by the mission. I mean, Harvey Mudd was founded in the 50s in the middle of the nuclear and the space age. And it was so critical for scientists and engineers to understand the impact that they have, the potential negative impact as well as the positive impact on society. And that's what really the founding principles of Harvey Mudd was all about. And so that inspired me. That's what got me to come to school in the first place. And to think that, wow, at graduation, I got associated with this mission of the school. That was quite special, I have to say. And then Harriet, you alluded to it. I mean, the more I live in the real world, trying to get things done, and you can't accomplish anything unless you work with other humans, other people, and inspire them, and be committed to a common mission. The more I work in the real world, the more I realize this training that you have in the humanities, philosophy, politics, economics, all of these things that I studied, Harvey Mudd, how critical that is. And then, of course, we've had role models like Steve Jobs was as famous for saying that what's really, really interesting, the interesting things happen at the intersection of the sciences and the humanities, right? It's all about the intersection of the two. And Harvey Mudd, to me, represents that more than any other educational institution I know of. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would like to share some of the questions with Ho Nam. We won't have a lot of time, but maybe if there are 2 or 3 questions from the audience that we might take now, and then I'll return to a few others that I've prepared for him.
Hi, my name is Martel Bell. I'm a PhD student at the University of Iowa. I wanted to know more about when you started venture capital. What are some of the fears or anxieties or things that you had to overcome when getting into that, and what kept you going through that 6-year period where there was nothing going on?
Yeah. Well, actually, it was even worse than a 6-year period of nothing going on. There's actually a not Harvey Mudd, but Harvard Business School case study on one of our really dark, difficult moments, and that was 2012. So it was after our survival period. So we got this kind of rebirth, and 7 years later, we were still struggling because that was after the great financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And struggling to raise the next fund, and somehow we made it out of there. So there was a really long period of kind of soul searching, and in terms of, what kept us going during that period, we get asked that question a lot, and I would say that I'm very fortunate to have partnered with people that we had each other's backs. And whenever I was tempted to maybe say, is this the right thing for me? And maybe I should be looking for a different kind of career or a different path in life. I just couldn't abandon ship. I was going to go down with the ship if it was going to go down. Mm-hmm. I couldn't do that to my partners. And if 1 or 2 of us decided to walk away, I think it would have put the entire enterprise at risk, and nobody walked. All I can say is for my own personal decision, I'm thankful, grateful that other people decided not to abandon ship, but I didn't feel like I could do it. to the other people that I was working with, to our investors, to our limited partners, to our founders that we were committed to, that we had made investments in, and to my own partners.
Hi, I'm Ann Rajan, trustee. What is the number one thing that you learned at Harvey Mudd that works best for you in business?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the number one thing comes from actually the most interesting class I ever took at Harvey Mudd. It was a class with Tad Beckman, who was a professor of philosophy. I think he was also head of the humanities department at the time. And there was one class that I took where there were only 2 students. And the other student, I remember him very distinctly. I don't remember his name, but he was a year ahead of me, and I thought he was the smartest guy at Harvey Mudd. And he had won some amazing math prize. He was a math major, but really smart guy. And like I was the other kid in the class. So I was like, okay. And because it was such a small class, we had to, like a lot of the classes we just took sitting around a little sofa in Professor Beckman's house with his golden retriever coming over for pets and sitting on our laps and so on. And in that class, in that philosophy class, the thing that he taught us is that it's so hard and so important to ask the right questions. If you are asking the right questions, like you are so far ahead in terms of life rather than just answering those questions. So that was and then that was the thing. It's like the hardest thing is to be thoughtful and to think about what are the important questions in life. And so that was really something I took away from that class. And that class was very humbling. It was really difficult to keep up. You know how sometimes you take these classes, and especially in humanities or whatever, you can kind of read the Cliff Notes? Cliff Notes of a book. And I tried to do that one class because I didn't have time to read the book. And when you're in a class discussion like this with the smartest kid at Harvey Mudd, with 2 people and the professor, and you try to have a conversation about the book, I just very quickly realized about 5-10 minutes into the class that I had to fess up. It's like, I'm so sorry, I did not read the book.
Honor code,
you can't
right?
fake your way in a class of 2. Yeah.
Honor code, that's great. I often always reflect and say that an empowering question will be met more likely with an empowering answer. A disempowering question will invite a disempowering answer. And I agree, the questions are so very, very important. I appreciate that as well. Maybe we'll take one more. Yes.
This is a question
Please introduce yourself.
Sorry. I'm Lindsay Ray, class of '08, which is a preview to my question. So I graduated in '08, and I remember being in a class with Gary Evans, and he goes, "You're coming of age in a very difficult time." And I was like, what is he talking about? And so my question relates to now. How do you bring the virtues that you are in the title to a very interesting time now?
Yeah, Harriet came up with that title, but I thought it was like, wow, this is amazing. Because we try to, at our firm, as we've grown substantially over the years, one of the core values that we have introduced to the firm is kindness. And we like to say kindness is not nice. It's not necessarily nice, but it's trying to be truthful. And we're always trying to figure out how the world works. The world is very complicated, very confusing, and in the real world, you could do all the right things, you could try your best, but there's no prizes, there's no guarantees of success. So that, in some ways, maybe that doesn't seem so kind. But I will tell you that there are no guarantees of success, but I will tell you that there are many things that you can do that will almost guarantee misery and failure. So that I could almost guarantee failure. So don't do those things. avoid the stupidity in life, and kindness, really trying to understand the truth of things. It's not that hard to be kind when you think about kindness in that sense, because it is totally a matter of survival, because the world is really complicated, and if you're not dealing with the right facts, and if you're not dealing with reality, and you're not dealing with truth, you've just decreased the probability of success. Again, there are no guarantees of success, but you're trying to avoid the dumb things, and if you're in denial of the truth, that is kind of one of the sure ways of guaranteeing that you're not going to do so well.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. My name is Alex. I'm a junior here at Mudd. And this question pertains a little bit to the last one, kind of a segue. But this talk was advertised as like opening up kind of an insight into like kindness and curiosity in venture capital. So this kind of a tricky question, but I'm wondering what roles kindness and curiosity play in like wealth accumulation and the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, and all of that's facilitated by VC-funded privatization.
Wow, there are a lot of questions there embedded. Because I could talk about wealth inequality, and I could talk about kindness. So let me comment on wealth inequality, because venture capital and capitalism in general is very much governed by the power law. And I can't tell you why the power law exists, but it explains many kinds of phenomenon in nature, like the distribution of the power of earthquakes is governed by the power law. Distribution of book sales and movie ticket offices and venture capital returns, and in even public market stock returns. If you look at it, in a very, very small percentage of the companies end up creating all of the value. And so power law is very interesting, because everybody thinks, everybody knows the 80-20 rule, right? Who hasn't heard of the 80-20 rule? And power laws tend to be scale invariant. And so, which means if you have large numbers, you could keep drilling down and apply the 80-20 rule to the top 20%. And if you do that, you get 464. You could apply the 80-20 rule then to one more time. So applying the 80-20 rule just twice to the top 4%, you get this very strange result. You have to scratch your head of 0.8% leading to 51.2% of the returns, which means 0.8%, that's less than 1 in 100. So if we do make 100 investments, that one winner will make more money than the other 99 combined. And I can't tell you that that's fair, but that's just the power law. That's just the math of the 80-20 rule, and that's how it works in our portfolio and what we have seen. And so then you have these crazy things, right, where in society then, well, you have like the top 1% controlling all this wealth. It's like it's not fair. Well, it's also true that the top 1% of taxpayers pay more than 50% of all of the taxes. And that is fair, as far as I'm concerned, because the top 1% has done so well, so they should pay for most of all of the taxes that support society. And then some, and more so, because a lot of that, the wealth that gets created should go somehow back into society through philanthropy. Doesn't all have to be philanthropy. I'm one of those few people that will not move out of California for taxes. I think it's the dumbest thing I've ever seen for somebody to make a lot of money, and because they have a lot of money, they're supposed to move somewhere else to save some taxes. That's kind of a silly thing. As far as I'm concerned, we've dedicated a substantial portion of all of our gains back into society, and whether that goes back through taxes or through philanthropy, if we save a little in taxes, it's going to go back in some other way. But if we end up paying more taxes, I'm not trying to optimize for minimal taxes, then it goes back into society in other ways. But that's kind of how we think about it in our family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to return to a couple of questions that I have for you as well, Ho. And in continuing to think about kindness and curiosity in starting companies, Could you talk a little bit about what characteristics you look for in founders and startup teams when you're making investment decisions?
Yeah, I wrote a blog post in 2006, so we're approaching the 20th anniversary of this little blog post called Foxes and Hedgehogs in Silicon Valley. And we kind of had a thesis, and at the time I would say it was more of a thesis or a theory, because we hadn't really backed some of these amazing entrepreneurs that were to come into our portfolio years later. But we've kind of stuck to that theme. And the fox and the hedgehog theme comes from an essay that Isaiah Berlin wrote, and he categorizes humans as either a fox or a hedgehog. And the fox knows many, many things, and the hedgehog only knows one big thing. And the hedgehog seems like this really boring, dowdy creature, kind of nose to the ground, just looking for food. And the fox is so clever and smart and could dart out, in and out of things. And the fox is this amazing serial entrepreneur. And the hedgehog is this boring entrepreneur that only works at one company maybe their entire life. And our thesis was that, hey, the game-changing companies, if we're fortunate enough to be associated with some of these, will be the life's work of a hedgehog entrepreneur. And for whatever reason, they decide to make their company their life's work. And we've had the good fortune of working with many entrepreneurs that have become billionaires or multi-billionaires. And the surprising thing is every single one of them, with the exception of one, who is the smallest of the billionaires, and he's dedicating his life to philanthropy. But every single, the other ones are all working. They're still working. At some point along the way, you work with some of these people and they realize, oh, like I could do whatever I want. I don't have to keep doing this. But then they choose to do it. They choose to go back to work, and that's their life's work. And that part of when I wrote that blog post, it was inspired by, again, going back to Warren Buffett, trying to figure out how that worked and what made him tick. And here was this person who I thought was an old man back in 1999 and 2000, right? And I went to every annual meeting for about a dozen years, trying to understand this person. And he hasn't had to work for money since age 25. And yet he says he tap dances to work every day. And he's 93 now, and he's still tap dancing to work. So as long as he's working, like I'm going to keep showing up to work.
Well, that is an important lesson and perspective as well. Ho, I'd like to do a lightning round with you. Would you be up for giving answers in a couple words or a short phrase?
All right.
Okay, here we go.
Pay attention. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. What's one key factor you consider when evaluating a startup for investment? One key factor.
It's really the management, looking for that hedgehog. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's one thing that is fascinating to you these days?
Well, it's a cliche, but it's got to be AI. I mean, I feel it's so incredibly lucky that our firm was born at the time, the birth of the internet, 96. And oh my gosh, we could be at the birth of another era that could be redefining for humanity. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to play out over the next 20, 30 years. Just like the internet is still playing out for 30 years, so we're at the beginning of something really interesting. Yeah.
We'll continue to explore that here on campus too. Can you name one book or resource that has greatly influenced your approach to venture capital?
Yeah, the book that really got me to understand the mindset of an amazing entrepreneur was Made in America by Sam Walton. So it has nothing to do with tech. But I felt like the world is very lucky that Sam Walton became very ill late in life, because everybody wanted him to write the book, and he would not have written the book. Like, he had so much fun just putting all of his efforts into Walmart and hunting with his dogs in his spare time. He didn't have time for much of anything else. Yeah. But when he was kind of at home, forced into it, he finally said, okay, I'll get around to writing down this book. And you get a glimpse into one of the most amazing hedgehog entrepreneurs ever. And it doesn't matter if you're tech or non-tech, the people who create these amazing enterprises, they're just like him. I mean, so I had Buffett in my mind when I wrote that blog post, but I had Sam Walton in my mind. And I read that book long before I went to that Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting. But that was very interesting to get a glimpse into his mind. Yeah.
I'll add that to my list. Complete these sentences.
Okay.
It all comes down to...
Ooh. All comes down to, I think, just being true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Success is...
Success is money can't buy love. So success is having quality people, relationships in your life.
If you could dedicate this conversation to one person, that one person would be?
I would say my mother.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Well, we've all learned, I think, so much from you across this conversation. I've just got one final question for you, Ho. I've heard many investors reflect the notion that everybody's an investor because everyone is investing their time and energy into something. Is there a send-off that you would like to challenge our Harvey Mudd community to invest in improving themselves?
Yeah, well, I think a speech that I heard like 31 years ago, my first year at Stanford, was by a guy named John Gardner, who was a professor at the time. He had this amazing career as an academic, as a CEO of a for-profit organization and also a non-profit organization.
Renewal? He wrote the book?
Renewal.
Renewal.
Exactly.
That was a brilliant book.
Self-renewal.
Yeah. Self-renewal, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
and so
brilliant.
he said something in that dinner speech that just stuck with me for the rest of my life. He said, you go to a cocktail party, we're going to go to a wonderful dinner for you tonight, and you meet lots of interesting people, and everybody wants to be interesting. They want to be the life of the party. And he said, the key to life is to be interested. Stay interested. Stay curious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So many learnings across this hour. Thank you so much, Ho, for joining us. Please help me thank Ho for being here today.